no garage, no hoist, no heat, lots of mud, but I'm gonna see if I can't get that transmission in that car today. Alright, what I got here is a flywheel from 5.3 liter truck motor, 2002-ish. This one has a dish to it. It's a dished flywheel. So anyway, like I say, it's got a little bit of a dish to it. Some of them are flat and some of them are dished. So this is a torque converter from a 700 R4 small block Chevy transmission. Now the only difference between the two, the bell housing is identical, so the transmission will bolt to the engine, to the 5.3, but the flexplate bolt pattern to the torque converter is different. So, and this is also a little bit shallow, so the hub of the torque converter is supposed to be in the back of the engine to keep it centered and hub centric, they call it. So I've already ordered the piece that goes in here, and it's like a little hub adapter spacer, and I'll throw up a link of that, or a picture of that. So you get that hub adapter, you put that on in the back of the crank or on the torque converter, preferably in the back of the crank, and then that'll give you the proper spacing there. This will bolt onto your LS motor, your 5.3, and then there's 3 bolts that holds the torque converter on, and there's a different spacing. So the old school 700 R4, 400, 350 transmissions, they're a little bit closer in the bolt pattern. So with your LS motor, to adapt it, you can slot these holes inward a little bit. It's not pretty the way it turned out with the chainsaw file, but I just reamed them inward. So basically make this like a slot. So you want to slot it inwards, and all 3 of them inwards. There's a tiny bit of wiggle room there, same as factory. So if there's any discrepancy in my center hub, because this is hub centric, so if there's any discrepancies, you want a little bit of wiggle room, not too much, and hopefully the head of your bolt is going to cover the entire slot. They're not slotted out very much, just enough. I don't recommend doing this unless you have the hub centric, the little centering hub adapter. This is the transmission I'm using. It's a 700 R4 transmission. This type of transmission was actually found in Camaros and Firebirds from factory back in the 3rd generation, from 82 to 92. This is a V8 model, so you need the V8 bell housing to fit the V8s. And the bell housing is the same on the LS motors. The only difference is, like, there's one bolt that you can't use in the corner. I think it might be the dipstick bolt there, I'm not sure. So might have to do something about that. But it'll all bolt on all the way around except for one bolt. I guess the crankshafts on the 99 and newer LS engines, I guess they're about 1 inch shorter or something like that. So they'll bolt up, but you need either a flex plate spacer or torque converter adapter, and it depends on if you have the dished flex plate or not. I have a dished flex plate. I think this goes in the back of the crank. Of course it'll fit here. It fits pretty snug, so I might have to clean that up around there, make it a little not quite so tight. But anyway, basically it just makes the snout a little bit longer. It's the same size, it's just an extension basically. So that goes on there. I'm gonna put it into the back of the crankshaft, and then I've already got the modified flex plate modified to fit this bolt pattern. I've already got it in there. I've got it torqued. The flex plate is torqued down. It's got Loctite on the threads on the bolts. So I'm going to put this in the back of the crankshaft, and then when I go to put the transmission in, this should slide into here, or everything should line up. This will keep your torque converter centered, and then when you tighten down your bolts, everything will be nice and straight and lined up with this. So basically this is like $15 on eBay, but it took 2 months to get here. It was definitely late coming or slow coming. So basically once you get the motor and tranny together and the torque converter in there, and it's hard to change that seal once the car is together. But right now it's easy to change it because it's right here. The tailstock is easy to get at like any time, I think, from underneath the car. So it's the same thing. I showed this already in the homemade junk buggy DIY side-by-side oversized golf cart, the homemade buggy project. I did one of these because it was an old gearbox that was sitting around that I used on that project. So I've already shown how to do the tailstock before. I've already showed how to do this in a previous video, but it's the same thing. It's the same as the input shaft. It's just a tin seal that's pressed into an aluminum housing recess, exact same as the front. Here's a side you've never seen before, the underside. There's a lot of undercoating on the underside, but underneath it's pretty good, I think. It's pretty solid for an old girl. Anyway, this is the flex plate that I modified here. I just modified the holes slightly. And this here is the Chinese cock ring for LS swaps in old school Chevy automatic transmissions. And I think it just goes, I think I'm gonna put it in the crank, and I'm just gonna leave it in the crank. That's my plan anyway. I've just been running it like this. Starter bolts to the block on the Chevy, so I got the flywheel. This is the automatic flex plate starter, and you can run it just like that. So now I'm going to tap this in, and then my torque converter will fit here and here, and everything else should just bolt right up. Man, that was way easier than the transmission seal, the torque converter seal. What about you? Are you gonna help? Friggin' right. I'm taking off the passenger side header because it's, when I go to let the engine down, it hits there. So I marked it with a yellow marker, and I'm gonna smash it with a sledgehammer. I'm gonna put a dent in the header just to make some little bit of clearance room there. So on the passenger side, the exhaust dumps right here, right beside these two bolts. So I might trim a little bit. I might trim this little extra wing that sticks out. Might trim that off. Well, I cut that chunk there off. Custom transmission. trying to put this friggin' transmission up in there. Just put it on a jack. I'm gonna see if I can jack it up in there. At least the sun's shining. But look at the frost. There's like frost on the everything. Wow. Put a spark plug in there for now. Anyway, it's hard to tell, but I got the transmission. Up in there. Got it up in there by myself. There's the transmission lines right there. I put a dent in there. Put a dent in the number 8 tube. And I think I marked it where it should be, so when I put it back on, there should be a little bit of room there in that corner to, yeah, to fit, hopefully. Maybe I'll put a bigger dent in it, who knows. Engine Masters had an episode on YouTube where they smashed the headers in with a sledgehammer and they put it on the dyno, and it didn't make a lick of a difference on the horsepower, so I'm okay with that. So I've got her up in position, lined up, and mated to the engine. Now I'm going to go ahead and just double check the torque converter, and I got some Loctite, and I can put some Loctite on the torque converter bolts and see if I can get those in. Well, I think she's, yep. Yeah, got her mated up there now. I just pried the torque converter ahead about 1/4 inch. Now she's up against the flywheel there now. I'm gonna have to get these bolts in. I'm afraid I might have to pull the starter again because the starter is right here. Well, I got the battery disconnected. And I disconnected the positive terminal on the battery. Oh my goodness, somebody strong must have put those bolts on there. Holy shit. Holy. Wow. Oh. Wow. That was way too tight. Well, I had to go get a socket to fit on the crank pulley so I can actually get a hold of it under compression and turn it. And you can see that, you can actually see this from up above, so I should be able to see it when it comes up here. I should be able to know when to stop. I didn't think it would be visible from up here, but it is. I can see the, looks like somewhere right about there. I should be able to get her in. Probably could have went a little bit more, but anyway, I'm gonna take my next bolt, make sure it's clean, make sure the threads are clean. I've already threaded them into the torque converter before, so I know that the threads are good and everything. I'm gonna put some of this blue Loctite on them, on the threads. Oh shit. I just dripped it right on my hand. Yuck. Anyway, hopefully it won't kill me. I should be wearing gloves. You never know about some products or some chemicals or whatever. You never know what's really in them, what the ingredients are. Oh yeah, she's going right in there, no problem. Sorry about that. My hands makes a better door than it does a window. Anyway, I got that one in, finger tight. I'm gonna turn to the next one. This one seems like it's pretty much home. There, now the whole engine's turning. Okay, and then one more. Okay, that's the last one. Number 3. Numéro 3. I'm actually getting them surprisingly tight with this wrench. I know the wrench doesn't really have a long handle on it, but I am getting them pretty tight. Okay, we got 3 of them in. I think they torque to 75 foot-pounds. I think, same as the flywheel. I'm not sure. I have to double check. Got the starter back on there, and torqued all the bolts down. So this here is factory with the car, with the body harness, and it was this went down to the transmission and it plugged into the factory 200 R4. I had to change the transmission because the V6 and V8 have a different bell housing, but this will plug right into the 700 R4, and there's a vacuum line that goes from this device here and it goes to the engine, and I think there's a vacuum port right there, so maybe I'll go there or something, I don't know. But you just run this vacuum line to the engine, and this plug goes to the transmission. And there's one more thing, which is the TV cable, or the kickdown cable, which normally goes to the carburetor on the old cars. So I'll have to see if it'll reach, and it'll be I'll have to do something custom to attach it here to the throttle body. I've seen one guy do it. It was exactly 180 degrees opposite of the throttle, so it was down here. And I think if I measure the throw length and the mounting length, I still haven't got the bracket on here yet, the throttle cable bracket. This is just like temporarily mocked, or this is just sitting here temporarily so I could push the gas pedal in the car. So I'll have to hook up the kickdown cable, plug in the 700 R4 down below, hook up the vacuum line and transmission lines. I'm going to run a separate transmission cooler. I thought about doing a block off plate for the heater box because that thing's pretty ugly, but I'm not too sure yet. I can tidy this up because there's no need for that to go over there and then come back here again. There's no need for that. So I can probably unclip that and tidy it up over here a little bit. And this here is gonna go to the O2 sensor, the front O2 sensor. I deleted the rear ones, so that's gonna go down the back eventually. So this can be tidied up a little more. I have to put the manifold back on, or the header back on. See how that fits. This is how I was turning the crank.